Texas Tech just absolutely murdered Iowa State in the Big 12 quarterfinals. We're going to break down what the Red Raiders did so well against the Cyclones and talk about what they need to do to repeat success against the Sooners coming up on today's Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Texas Tech, a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our channel if you have not already. I'm Ryan Mainville. I cover Texas Tech for the Dallas Morning News. I'm joined by Emery Lida, a longtime Texas Tech analyst, writer, and podcaster. Today, we've got to talk about the absolute dominant victory that Texas Tech just put on Iowa State. I mean, Emery, I don't remember the last time I saw something like this in a Big 12 tournament game. I was watching Kansas and West Virginia play earlier today, and it was pretty boring. 24-point win for the Jayhawks. They had complete control for most of that win. I think it was the biggest margin of victory that there has been in a Big 12 tournament game since 2013. And then, hey, Texas Tech rounds off the nightcap with a 31-point victory over Iowa State, holding the Cyclones to just 41 points. What are your initial thoughts, man?
Well, first off, I'm about to do a basketball reference search in a few minutes to check that out. But on a second, I mean, it feels really good to just have a comfortable win like this. Like, you look at the last few weeks of Tech basketball, and even the games that Tech were able to win, like against Kansas State, against Texas, and against Baylor, it was really uncomfortable. Game was up in the air for a while, and it felt like you kind of needed this sort of breakaway win. And I know that obviously you've had some good wins in the last month, but you've also, the last week or two, have kind of struggled. And to have the close loss to Oklahoma State, the close loss to TCU, I mean, just being able to get back on the right track, really, from start to finish, this was a game that Tech dominated. I mean, Iowa State scored first and then literally did not lead the entire rest of the game. And to be able to just put a team that has been pretty good in conference play away like this, just a testament to the ability of the defense. And certainly, I mean, offensively, I really liked what we saw tonight. I think that being able to push the tempo was something that we hadn't really seen as much of as of late. And to be able to get that done and really just have the offense flowing, especially in the first half, I think that that's the biggest takeaway for me, is you needed this game to get back on the right track. I think that more than anything, the process of this game was right. I feel like this wasn't one of those blowouts that was just Tech hitting fluky shots or whatnot. Tech got pretty much whatever they wanted in the open court throughout most of the game. And the half court, even, they were able to get quite a bit of good looks off of it. So for me, I mean, it's nice to have Kevin Mcclure back. It's nice to have TJ Shannon looking as healthy as he's been. And this was a total domination. It was the best Tech has looked in a game really all season, in my opinion. And it makes me optimistic going into the rest of the conference tournament.
Yeah, when we were previewing this game, I think that we were both kind of on the same page, and like, you wanted to win this game. That should be your objective. But more than anything, you wanted to figure things out with your offense, get Kevin McCullough back into the mix, figure out what your offense will do with him back in the fold, find consistent offense outside of Bryson Williams. But if you did all of those things and you still lost the game, it was stomachable. I mean, Iowa State has historically been really, really good in the Big 12 tournament since it has been moved to KC. This is, an Iowa State team that probably wanted another win on their resume. Texas Tech is pretty firm on that 3 or 4 line right now. And so you were just really trying to lose some of the bad mojo that you've had the past 3 games and get a little bit of a confidence boost and a certainty on where you're at as a team. And this is not exactly what I had in mind, a 30.1 win in which you just absolutely dominate a team on both ends of the floor. But Texas Tech, man, they will take it nonetheless. I mean, you look at these numbers, and they are unbelievable. Iowa State shot 31% from the field, 20% from 3, had 20 turnovers. Texas Tech was plus 16 on the glass. Their bench scored 22 points to Iowa State's 13. Texas Tech scored 42 points in the paint. Iowa State scored 41 points the entire game. It's just nuts, man. Do you have the box score up in front of you?
Somewhat, yeah. I've got the stat broadcast on
Stay
to
on
click
this
away.
window and tell me
Okay.
what you think the fast break point advantage was for Texas Tech tonight.
I'm gonna go ahead and say 22-4.
It was 23-0.
Oh
Still
wow.
still very, very close for the stat wizard. Of course you got a knack on that, but I really thought that was one of my biggest takeaways from this game is how aggressive Texas Tech played on the offensive end. I mean, you were texting me and you were like, this is on pace to be easily one of their fastest games of the season, and I think a reason for that is how well they played in transition.
Yeah, I think that having Kevin Mcclure back, I felt like was one of the keys to that. And I don't know if it's an intentional move to play faster when he's in the game, but when you look at Tech's ability to play aggressive in transition is something that we really saw tonight. And I think we saw at times in the early part of the season, and then it kind of disappeared once he got hurt, and Tech really settled into more of a half court sort of grinded out sort of offense. And I mean, this is what we heard from Barrett Peary coming into Tech was that he was going to be someone and their Tech's offense was going to be one that kind of pushed the tempo like we saw him do up at Portland State. And this was kind of resemblant of what I think some people had envisioned sort of an up-tempo Texas Tech offense to look like. I mean, certainly you still had your heavy dosage of half-court offense in the second half, but at the same time, the ability to push transition, really especially just get out open on the breaks after turnovers, that was something that at times in the regular season, we've seen that Tech has struggled with that to kind of establish themselves in transition. But tonight, it was like any lane opportunity, any opportunity to get out ahead of the pack in the break and get sort of those breakaway dunk or layup opportunities. Tech was able to hit those. I especially think in the first half, Mcclure had multiple really good passes. And then we also saw like it was everyone. It was like as soon as the steal happened, people had their heads up, and it was really easy to kind of see just how effective that was because it really forced Iowa State to kind of have to second guess every pass they were making. You saw once Iowa State's half court offense got out of the rhythm, once Tyrese Hunter was struggling with turning the ball over, it was an absolute struggle for them to get anything going. And I think that over the course of the game, that just wore them down. And in the second half, I didn't really notice the tempo quite as much, but still, you had a lot of run out opportunities.
I like hardly remember anything from the second half because Texas Tech was truly just coasting. I mean, it was just unbelievable the pace that they played at today, the confidence that they had for all 40 minutes, the aggressiveness, the assertion. I mean, earlier we watched a game where Texas went into halftime up 18, got a 20-point lead in the second half. Mike Miles goes down with another injury. Eddie Lampkin is clearly not 100%, and you're thinking Texas is going to smother them. Like it's going to be ugly, and they put their foot off the gas. It's just what happened. But Texas Tech played all 40 minutes tonight, every single second, and I think that mentality going into March is really important. Like I really do think that to have that grit and that knack is really important. And this is also just a really easy excuse for me to dunk on Texas for blowing a 20-point lead. But I want to talk about some of the individual performances that happened tonight because, man, there are some really, really impressive things on this box score. But first, a quick word from Built Bar. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not a resolution because I actually enjoy eating Built Bar products. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these, they are better. Go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You will be blown away. They're high in protein, low in calorie, high in fiber, low in carb. Go to Built.com today to get your hands on some of your own. Thanks again for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Be sure to check out the Locked On Bracket Breakdown March 14th right here on the Locked On Texas Tech podcast feed and YouTube channel. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, and betting expert Lee Sterling give you in-depth breakdowns on every matchup. Texas Tech keeps playing like they did against Iowa State. They will surely have plenty of applause from analysts heading into Selection Sunday. Emory, a lot of good offense in this game from Texas Tech at an individual level. I think they had 4 guys finish in double figures, with Warren finishing with just 9. But before any of that, I want to talk about Isaiah Brockington being held to 3 of 16 shooting from the field. I mean, what does it take for your defense to execute at that level against a player of his magnitude? Because really, what we've talked about, and now 3 previews of Iowa State this season, is that this guy is what makes it all work for Iowa State. And if you can kind of cause a chink in the armor there, you're going to be able to slow down this entire offense. Tonight, Texas Tech did what they've done all season. They created a really good defensive game plan to limit the opponent's best player, and they just completely threw Iowa State off with that. But I mean, 7 points for Brockington, 3 of 16 from the field, and he played all but 7 minutes. That cannot go overlooked.
Yeah, and he started the game 0 of 6 from the field, and he ended, I believe, 1 of 7. So really, I mean, you're talking about the entire 40 minutes. Tech was just swarming Brockington whenever he was out there. And I mean, this is something that I feel like with Brockington in particular, it's really important to get the switches down and make sure that the bigs are disciplined and the switches are seamless, and that you're able to really kind of keep him out of attacking one-on-ones in the mid-range. And especially whenever he would drive, they're quick to rotate. Like, this was a flawless performance from Tech's defense on Brockington individually. And like, really, outside of a couple of threes, I believe he got off that were semi uncontested. And I think he had one mid-range where he was able to get a pretty good one. Like, most of the shots he was taking were contested looks that he would struggle to hit on any night. And I know people are going to look at 3 of 16 in mine and assume that that's variance. I do think there's some degree of he probably did have an off night. I think you can say that at the end of the day, no player that's that good is going to shoot 3 of 16 regardless of the defense they're facing. But Tech made it really difficult on him. And that's all you can do against a player of Brockington's caliber. And to be able to switch like they did, and really it was everyone. It was a team effort. You saw pretty much any player that got out there outside of maybe Bacho had at least one possession where they were forced to guard Brockington with the ball in his hands who was looking to score. So for me, it's the switching that really sort of did it for them. And I think that it's one of those things where he's a player that's very unique to have to guard. Is absolutely kills people in the mid-range. He's probably one of the most efficient mid-range players you're going to find in all of college basketball. So switching onto him, making sure you don't get beat one-on-one, that was at a premium. And I mean, Tech executed. I feel like you mentioned, he's probably the only real consistent ignition for Iowa State's offense. And when he's 0 of 6 to start the game and you don't really have any other source of offense, it's going to be a long night for you.
Yeah, and I mentioned on our preview episode before this game that I thought that Tyrese Hunter was just in the midst of a really, really good stretch playmaking. But I didn't mention this on our podcast, which I should have, because it would have made me look like a genius. But when I was on the Iowa State Daily podcast, I mentioned that Hunter had two performances against Texas Tech that were not so great compared to the rest of his season numbers in the regular season. And I told Matt Ballantyne, hey, I don't think that's a mistake. The dude is young, and he's also a little bit undersized. And so whenever you're playing against a very veteran Texas Tech defense that is very long and very big, you're going to tend to struggle. 2 assists, 7 turnovers tonight. It was not a pretty game to watch from him.
Ask Kennedy Chandler about that when it comes to facing Tech's defense as a young point guard. I mean, I don't care how good you are. And Tyrese Hunter is going to be a really good player in a couple of years. But I mean, when you're a guard that struggles to shoot off the dribble and struggles to shoot in general and can be a little bit reckless at times, that's exactly what I think Tech really feasts against. Like guards like Nigel Pack, for example, that can shoot off the dribble and our elite shooters can kind of overcome some of the challenges that Tech's defense presents to young guards just with their aggressiveness. But a guy like Tyrese Hunter, I think he's just not quite there yet from a control standpoint. And I mean, we saw it tonight. He had some good plays, like the off dribble 3 he hit early on in the game. I thought he was going to be on for a night after that one, because I mean, that was not something I expected him to be able to do. But certainly as the game kind of wore on, you just saw the mistakes continue to pile up. He had a couple of on-ball turnovers. He had a couple where he threw errant passes, and then I believe he had one where he was trying to post up, which was really a strange decision. But in general, like, you just saw the kind of the ball handling really sort of escaped him. And when Hunter's turning the ball over and when Brockington's not making shots, and you're having to rely on Caleb Grill as your main source of efficient offense, that's not going to end well for you.
I like to stay in contact with a lot of people that either cover the Big 12 or just watch it a lot. And I got a lot of messages tonight about TJ Shannon and just the game that he had. Just a very noticeable performance in terms of really the way that his season has played out thus far, and just where he's been the last couple of games, especially as he's been battling injury. 15 points on 5 of 9 shooting, 2 of 3 from deep, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, 4 boards, 1 assist. He did have 5 turnovers, but he also had 3 steals. I really don't think that TJ took an ill-advised shot in this game. I think that the passing was a little bit off for points of this game, and I thought that maybe that was going to be the thing that got him on the court consistently, especially after what he did against Oklahoma State. But in this game, it was the Terrence Shannon Jr. show, and I really do feel like he is one of the guys that has to play good basketball for Texas Tech if they're going to make a run. I mean, obviously you have Bryson Williams, but outside of him, you need guys that can create their own offense, so you're not switching into that offensive scheme where you're just constantly having to force feed the ball down low. And tonight, Terrence Shannon Jr. showed that he is still very capable of creating his own shot and getting high-quality looks at the rim. I thought that this was really one of TJ's best performances of the season, and without a doubt is probably one of the most, I don't know how to word this, but I think that this should give Tech fans a lot of confidence going forward that he is back to some of this form and he is getting to the rim as consistently as he is.
Yeah, I actually think, okay, so of his 8 shot attempts, he had the 2 catch and shoot threes, and the shots that weren't falling on the inside, I still felt like they were good shots because he was able to get to the rim effectively. And really, in all honesty, if this was a game that wasn't officiated by John Higgins and him being inefficient, I think you would probably see a couple of more calls, but different story from a different day. But the point is, I was happy with TJ's decision making. And I think even the turnovers, like he had 2 that were really about as nitpicky as you can get. And one of those was they had just gotten a steal and someone threw it to him in the half, basically at midcourt, and he had 3 Iowa State defenders around him. And so he caught that ball, brought it down. Technically, he's responsible for the turnover because he lost the ball, but like feasibly, he was put in a really difficult situation. Then he also had a turnover where his foot was on the line when he caught a pass from Mcclure that technically went against him as a turnover. But as a whole, I mean, this was a composed performance by TJ. I think that offensively, he was able to hit the catch and shoot threes, which obviously bolstered some of the scoring. He was able to get to the rim effectively. I thought the passing was maybe a slight step back from what we've seen, but even then, like I saw some good passes from him. I think off the drive, he did a good job, especially there was a pass at the start of the second half where he drove to his left, was able to find Davion Warren in the corner and get it to him quick enough that Warren could get an uncontested 3 and the shot didn't fall. But like that's something where when TJ's struggling as a playmaker, that's a pass that sometimes he'll miss. And that's one that Warren himself missed later in the game. But certainly, like to see TJ kind of at full strength offensively, or at least as close as he's been to being full strength and really moving well laterally, moving well vertically, that's something that should be really encouraging for Tech fans because like you said, for them to get far in the tournament, you have to have other sources of offense outside of Bryson Williams because you know that post-up offense isn't going to last forever. And so having Shannon being able to get to the rim effectively and being his usual TJ Shannon self is a really good thing for Tech.
Kevin Mcclure played his first basketball since, I believe, February 26th, whenever he stepped on Jamie Dixon's foot, and his presence was immediately noticeable. Even when he wasn't showing up in the box score, he was just being typical Kevin McCullough, making very high basketball IQ plays, making great passes in transition, moving really well on the defensive end, calling out assignments. It's so clear, man. And I know that I've kind of like I've put my flag in the ground and saying that one guy will not fix Texas Tech's offensive issues, but man, Kevin McCullough is going to make it really, really hard to hold on to that take because the sheer amount of basketball IQ that he provides when he is on the court is incredible. The guy is just an absolute engine. There were a couple of times in the half court tonight that I thought he could have made a little bit of a better decision, but in transition, just played really, really good basketball, played really, really good defense, got into foul trouble a little bit there, but I thought he was spectacular. And then to make a couple of pull-up threes was just unbelievable, man. It was a really, really encouraging sign. Give me your quick thoughts on what you saw from Mcclure against Iowa State.
Transition passing was really incredible. I mean, we've seen this before. We saw it against Baylor earlier in the season, but that's something he really thrives in. Certainly hitting the pull-up threes was a really welcome sight. I mean, I don't think he's going to be able to consistently do that at like a 40% clip, but if he's hitting those shots, Tech is a Final Four contender. And then just in general, it was nice to have him back out there, not just back out there, but not being limited to minutes and being limited to being just out there for a few minutes and clearly not himself. I think this was the healthiest he's looked since the start of conference play. And just having him out there being a nice force on defense, and then obviously all they can bring offensively, both in transition and the half court, it's nice to see. And I think it helps Tech just unlock yet another gear that they have to them.
Texas Tech has another game today, so we need to start looking at that game. But first, a quick word from BetOnline. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam, as you can tell, for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Texas Tech probably feeling pretty good about themselves, coming off a 31-point win over Iowa State. That was definitely much needed for many reasons. Obviously, this advances you in the tournament. This gives you a lot more confidence on the offensive end, especially, but also on the defensive end. Just kind of reinforces some things that you know are true and that you know are going to be strengths for you. But now Texas Tech isn't really worried about where they got moral victories, because they're going to try and win 2 conference tournament games for the first time in 17 years. They've got to get through an Oklahoma team that knocked off Baylor on Thursday afternoon. Emory, did you catch that game? And if you did, what did you see from Oklahoma that allowed them to pull away against the Bears?
I watched most of the second half of it, and I thought that the biggest thing for me was Jacob Groves really had a nice game. I think his ability to space the floor for them is something that, I mean, obviously, his brother Tanner, and Tanner Groves has been one of the best additions to a Big 12 squad this season. But Jacob Groves is plenty capable of that as well. He scored 23 against Kansas as the Eastern Washington player. And this game, it was just floor spacing that was really important. I thought Umoja Gibson, kind of a atypical Umoja Gibson performance, a lot more driving than I think I'm used to seeing, at least from what I've watched on tape of him. And just in general, this Oklahoma offense was able to move very well without the ball. I feel like they created a lot of good looks, and certainly I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain the level of shooting that they had in the game, but it wasn't a fluke in the sense that they were getting genuinely good looks and being able to hit them. And then on the other end, I feel like Baylor did miss a lot of good looks in that game, especially in the second half. And I mean, you could really see some of the impacts of having a short rotation. I felt like they got a little bit tired. But certainly, I mean, Oklahoma played tough defense as they've been playing throughout the conference season. And I mean, obviously not having LJ Cryer, having Adam Flagler still pretty limited. That's going to hurt what Baylor can do, but still just to be able to kind of have Oklahoma pull that one out with the aid of some good shooting and certainly guys stepping up like Jacob Groves. I felt like it was a good win for the Sooners and one that they can build on going forward.
Yeah, I watched all 40 minutes of that game, and I think that Oklahoma really was able to just emphasize where all of their greatest strengths are as a team. I'm really not sure that there's a team in this conference that moves as well without the ball as Oklahoma does. It doesn't always end in quality shots because they just don't have the playmakers to be able to execute it as a high level. And I do think that Gibson is a good and he's like a good initiator. He's mainly just a scorer, though. Goldwire has his moments, but just what they're able to do in terms of moving off the ball on cuts, it really opens up their offense. It really opened up their offense whenever they beat Tech by 15, and it did it pretty much on the perimeter. But in this game, we also saw them do it inside and get shots at the basket, which is where Oklahoma really wants to play most of the time. You mentioned Jacob Groves. he actually had a pretty abysmal first half in this game, and I've been kind of critical watching him play this season because at times it just kind of feels like he's a body on the bench. And I almost had a tweet that I sent out, and I'm really glad that I didn't. It's in my drafts right now. But for all of the faithful Locked On Texas Tech listeners that have made it 25 minutes into this podcast, I'm going to share it. I'm just going to pull back the curtain. I almost tweeted that Jacob Groves is Brock Cunningham with starter level minutes.
Oh dear,
And I'm
Ryan,
very glad that it stayed in the chamber.
you were gonna get us burned at the stake if you had tweeted that.
And Fran Fraschilla kind of dunked on him mid-game. I don't know if you were tuned into it, but he called Jacob Groves a throw-in to Tanner Groves, which everyone knows is the truth.
I was
But
there when he clarified it.
when he apologized.
Yeah.
But there are like certain things that you can't say on live TV, and there are also certain things that you should not tweet. So very glad I had minimal amounts of wisdom and discernment in that moment. But clearly, man, Jacob Groves, I mean, there's value for guys that can knock down open shots in college basketball. So all the power to him. If he makes 13 points against Texas Tech in the second half of their game on Friday night, I guarantee you the Red Raiders will not be very happy. Emory, as you've watched this Oklahoma team throughout the course of the season, and especially against that Baylor game, I mean, Texas Tech knows all too well that it is not easy to beat that team. What do you think that Texas Tech needs to do to come away with a win and find themselves in the Big 12 championship?
I'm going to say three things. I think you have to rotate well defensively. Again, like you, I think no one in the conference moves better than Oklahoma does off the ball. Now, are the results there? Not yet, because their roster is pretty limited at this point. They struggle to have playmakers, kind of in a similar fashion to some of the deficiencies that we've seen at times from Tech this season, just in not having the guards that can either drive or guards that struggle to shoot. So you have kind of none of their guards kind of fit both of those molds, and that's something that hurts them. But certainly being able to rotate on the perimeter, keep guys from getting open catch and shoot looks, and being able to get inside. Oklahoma is one of the best cutting teams in the nation, and that's been proven throughout the season. So just being disciplined and rotating well and kind of avoiding the mental lapses that we've seen at times this season from Tech in that sense. And then the other two things have to do with the offense. I think if you can take advantage of some of the ball handling issues that Oklahoma's had over the course of the season, they're pretty high in turnover rank. Then that's going to really allow you to get into transition. And we saw tonight really what transition could do for this Tech offense. You saw what was it? It was 23 transition points, right? And this one, yeah. So Tech had 23 transition points. If you can get that level of transition offense, it's going to do you really well, because that was one of the differences from the first half to the second half. In that Oklahoma Tech game, the one that they lost in Norman, was just the first half you're able to live off of those turnovers. The second half they weren't quite there, and you weren't able to get those transition looks. So being able to feast in transition. And the third thing is just continuing to get the ball moving well. I thought that was one of the best things that Tech did in this game against Iowa State. And it's something that, even though Oklahoma's a really good defense, they can be prone to sometimes being very aggressive. And I think you can take advantage of that by sort of continuing to rotate the ball around. I feel like it's something that we've seen teams like Kansas at times have been able to exploit. And even in this game, I felt like in the second half, Baylor was able to get the ball moving fairly well and just weren't knocking down shots. And so I just think that's kind of the big things, is if you can get the ball moving, if you can get out in transition, and if you can avoid the mental lapse on rotations, I think you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, moving on defense is going to be really, really big. I think having Kevin Mcclure back should help a lot in that department in terms of communication. Whenever Texas Tech beat Oklahoma in Lubbock, it was one of their best defensive performances of the conference slate. In terms of points per possession, it actually was before tonight when 59.7 adjusted offensive efficiency for Iowa State. That is pretty remarkable. But one of the reasons Texas Tech was so successful in that game is that they turned Oklahoma over a lot in that game. A third of OU's possessions ended in a turnover in that game. That just cannot happen if you want to win basketball games. And I do think that's one of my keys to the game. Really, my number one key to the game is just don't turn the ball over and force them to turn the ball over a lot. I think that was a really, really big key for Texas Tech opening up a big lead against Iowa State tonight. Obviously, pretty much everything went into Texas Tech's favor tonight, but you are going to be going up against an Oklahoma team that is fighting for their tournament lives. It cannot be overstated how desperately they need this win to really solidify themselves in the field. And so you've got to be really, really gritty if you're Texas Tech and you want to win this game. And I think they will. I don't feel overwhelmingly confident about it, especially after OU beats Baylor, but I think that what tonight did for Texas Tech in terms of how they were able to defeat Iowa State, I think it's going to propel them forward, at least for another game. We can talk again whenever they're playing Kansas on Saturday, but I do think that this win against Iowa State is going to do a lot of good things for Texas Tech. I'm going to pick it in a very, very close game, 63-60.
Yeah, so I was on the Locked On Big 12 roundtable earlier this week discussing the conference tournament. You can check that out if you haven't already. But Locked On Oklahoma and John Williams, he's a great guy if you can check out his podcast. But he mentioned this past week that he was going to see us when we started talking about football in a few weeks. And, this win over Baylor, it kind of brings Oklahoma back into the tournament conversation. They're on Lunardi's first 4 out. I think if you look at bracket matrix, obviously they were a little bit further beyond that coming into today. But we'll have to see what they end up doing. And I think that in terms of this game, this is a huge opportunity for Oklahoma. And I mean, that carries a lot of weight. Oklahoma's a team that's fighting for their lives. They're a team that matches up pretty well against Tech from an off-ball movement. I'm not sure if we get a repeat of what happened in Lubbock, it's not going to be close because Tech was able to really take advantage of Oklahoma's sloppy ball handling in that one. But for this one, I mean, I just have a feeling, and I'm going to pick the Sooners in this one. So I believe it's only the second time I've picked against Tech on this entire podcast, but I just think the way this Oklahoma team is going to be fighting and the way that they're going to be really needing this game, because if they win this game, you can say they have a pretty good shot getting the tournament. And I just think that if you look back to what they did in Norman, that was no fluke. I think Porter Moser had a really good game plan for that. I don't know if it's easy to replicate. I don't think it's going to be easy to replicate, but I think it's something that's possible. And with a team that's fighting for their lives, I just think they're going to be able to get everything, get some lucky bounces, get everything to go their way, and I think they'll win. I'll go with 66-64. It's going to be close one way or the other, but I just feel like Oklahoma's going to pull it out in the end.
Hard to pick against them. I really do think it's a coin flip at this point, but we will see what happens on Friday night. Another late tip, make sure you drink your coffee on Friday night and hang in there. We will be back then to bring you more coverage on whatever ends up happening in the Texas Tech-Oklahoma game. Thank you for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Just a reminder that we are free and available on all platforms and wherever you get podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. Leave us a review wherever you listen. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not already. You can follow us on Twitter to keep up with us before the game. You can follow me at rmainvillelbk. You can follow Emery at eraser41, and you can follow the official Locked On Texas Tech Twitter page at Locked On TTU. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for listening.